Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, the sound of hope. I'm Elaine S, your host. Someone once said that God speaks to people in different ways. Did you ever have dreams, visions, or a special experience in which you felt God was speaking to you? The Torah tells us that Abraham, Jacob, and many others heard and experienced God. Does Adonai speak to people like that nowadays? On Tikvah Radio, we interview people who have had an encounter with the God of Israel, a special experience. Some have even had personal miracles, and all have found the Messiah of Israel. Stay tuned to Tikvah Radio Show and hear an amazing story of someone who was encountered by God. Welcome, Mishpocha. We are so glad you joined us. Today, our guest is published author Elaine Sherman Sturm. Her writings include Sherman, David 1, and Finding Melody. She has also written many poems, and we hope in the future that she will publish them as well. Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, Elaine. Glad to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be there with you.
So, Elaine, I was reading your bio that you sent us, and your Jewish parents were Lithuanian immigrants.
That's right.
And you were born in French-speaking Montreal, Canada. That's a unique combination. Whoa. What does that look like? How was your life different than the normal child in Montreal or in Canada?
Well, we left Montreal when I was a little under 6 because I started kindergarten in Vancouver. So all I can remember in Montreal is that the snowbanks were taller than I was. Those are the ones just on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I can remember my grandmother's address in Montreal, but she didn't speak any English, so I didn't get to talk with her too much. But so when we moved to Vancouver, my mom and dad, we were poor as a family, basically, not dirt poor or anything. But my parents always both worked, and my father was a janitor, my mother was a waitress, and so when I was in second grade, my parents, I was the youngest of 5 children, so my parents sent me to a Jewish school, and I did not feel comfortable there. The girls were kind of snooty. The boys acted like brats. And I don't know how my parents even afforded, putting me there.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was because I was the youngest, I was special. I don't know. My oldest sister was special. My oldest brother was special. But I asked if I could go back to a public school, and they agreed. That was fine. And the teacher sat me in the same seat next to the only other Jewish girl in the school. Her name was Karen, and we became friends, and we were friends after that for many years, and that was just a blessing, having her there.
That's great. So your parents spoke the language of their native country, Lithuania. So did they teach you that language? Or?
So it would be my grandparents came over from Lithuania, and that would be my ancestors. My parents were both born in Montreal, and I guess at that time you did have to know French to speak to the people, but I never really learned. Us kids really never learned the language per se, but my parents did speak to us in French. They spoke in French when they didn't want us to know what they were saying, but my father would give us orders in French, like fermez la porte, close the door, stuff like that. So we all know a little bit of French, but not enough to really converse. My mother spoke about 7 languages. She was kind of a genius. Her father was a genius. He was a translator with some government agency, and she just picked up the gift that he had. So my parents both spoke Yiddish and French and Hebrew, and then my mother taught herself all of these other languages. So as young as I was, I don't recall having a problem, communicating with other little kids.
Did you see the world differently, do you think, than your peers? How did you feel about people in different cultures and countries when you have all this different ethnicity in your family and your mom speaking all these different languages, that really is not the norm. So how do you feel that changed you as a person?
Well, I mean, she would use the languages in her jobs, you know, when she needed it. She didn't always use them, but I just love languages too. So whenever I talked with anybody of a different ethnicity that had different language, I always found out, you know, how to say hello and goodbye, so I could communicate with them. I love it. I can speak a few words in several different languages. I mean, we have several Russian, mostly from the Ukraine, people that speak Russian in our congregation, and I've learned enough to say, you know, good morning, how are you? And I absolutely love it. But when I went to elementary school, I didn't hide the fact that I was Jewish. I didn't know that you were supposed to do that. I was skinny. All my family were skinny. And so the kids made fun of me because of that, but they also made fun of me because I was Jewish. And sometimes, one time we all had a detention after school. My father came up to get me because I had osteomyelitis when I was a child, and I was in the hospital for a while. I wasn't supposed to stand up for a long time. He would come up and get me, and then if anybody made fun of me, he would go over to that person and kind of let them have it and say, you don't talk like that to my daughter.
He was standing up for you.
So, yes, but they never really encouraged us to tell anybody, that we were Jewish, and so I never wore a Star of David. In fact, I had a good friend that I believe was a Christian, and they had me over at Christmas time, and they gave me a present, which was a Star of David, and I was very honored for that, and I ended up losing it, but I never would wear it in public. My older sister has worn hers for years, but I would never wear it in public because I knew there was anti-Semitism. In fact, when I got married, my mother-in-law was somewhat anti-Semitic, and she told us that we could get the marriage annulled.
Wow.
And we kind of worked through that, but it is out there. So I'm not real outgoing about those facts unless I find out something about them where they might understand.
After 6 years old, you guys moved to the U.S., right? Is that correct?
Well, actually, before I was 6, we moved from Montreal to Vancouver, so the far west of Canada, for my father's health and my sister's health. So we lived there in Vancouver until I graduated high school, and that's when my parents wanted to move to the land of milk and honey for better opportunities, and that's when most of the family moved south to California as well, and so then the rest of us moved after I graduated high school, and we were in Southern California. Okay,
so then you were in Vancouver, not in Canada for a while until high school.
But when I was, like I said, when I was 9, I developed osteomyelitis, and I had to go in the hospital for 2 months, and so somebody came and visited me every day, my mom and dad, and that was socialized medicine in Canada, so I don't think it cost us much of anything. But, I was separated from people at school and everything, and one class that I had been from, everybody in the class wrote me a letter, encouraging me, and I thought that was so special. And I think that was a key to my wanting to write, because I wanted to make other people, I wanted to pay that forward, kind of, I guess, today you'd say. I wanted to encourage other people by writing to them and stuff. And so after I became a believer in Yeshua, I would write to my relatives and talk to them about the Lord and try to, write a prayer and in hopes and in praying that they would, understand what that was and would make a decision to follow the Lord, to follow the Messiah.
I hear you. So, in junior high, you asked your brother an important question. What was that question?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why we got into the conversation, but I said, I asked him, this is my oldest brother, the only one that was bar mitzvah, but I said, do you believe that there's a God? And he said, well, I think there's something up there. And so I guess I always had that feeling inside of me that there was something else to life. It wasn't just about us. And I can remember years later, when we were in Victoria, Canada, where my husband was transferred, to be a manager trainee in a bank, that I was just driving along, thinking, what's going on in life? And I hit the curb, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what is happening here? What is going on? There's something I'm missing. Something. I just felt that void that I think that God places in your heart, and I just wanted to know what it was. And I didn't find out until several years later what that void was for. But I think I was really always kind of the one searching. And the Bible says a little child shall lead them, and so I'm believing, according to the scriptures, that maybe God is using me to reach my family, because my mother developed Alzheimer's when she was older, and my father was very ill, and we thought he was going to die. And so when I drove down to California praying the whole way that he would pray with me and get saved, and it turned out that he came out of 4 very serious illnesses, and he was 87 at the time, and so my mom was about 78, I think. And she was sitting, and she couldn't read anymore because she couldn't remember what she was reading. And so she was just sitting, the TV was on, and I started talking to her about the Messiah, and she was open. And so she actually prayed with me.
Wow, that's wonderful.
She, and of course it wasn't enough that she prayed and, asked the Messiah into her heart. I had to have a confirmation. So, the next day I asked the Lord to show me for sure that she knew what she was doing. And we went into this little restaurant in Simi Valley. That's where my dad was in the hospital. And the actor, George Kennedy, was sitting in a booth a ways from us. And there was my husband, myself, my mother, and my sister-in-law, Jeannie. And she said, oh, look, there's George Kennedy. And she said, oh, I would love to have his autograph. And my mother was always very eccentric. And so she stood up and she said, I'll take care of this. And she walked over to him and she talked to him, and she came back with an autograph. But she told us that she went over to him and she said, she touched him and she said, excuse me, but I want you to pray for my husband. He's in the hospital.
Wow.
And so she came back, and later when we were leaving the restaurant, she kept saying, oh, I'm worried about your father. I don't know if he's going to be okay. And I said, oh, Mom, God will take care of him. And she goes, I know. She put her hand in the air, and she goes, I know. The Lord will take care of him. So that was my confirmation.
Wow. Something happened with her, for sure. Yeah, so...
She wouldn't know.
I'm sorry?
Well, she might not even remember that later, but God still honored the prayer.
Yeah. It's a matter of her spirit, even if her brain wasn't, quite there. But yeah, her spirit was born again. So, so at the time you asked your brother, you were thinking, okay, yeah, I believe there's something up there too. But that's as far as it went? Is that true? Because you didn't have much Jewish upbringing, is that correct?
Well, I mean, it was mostly traditional, right? Just mostly tradition. My mom, I can remember only once or twice a year that we would have a special meal, with a glass bottle of Coca-Cola and a glass bottle of 7-Up. And she would light candles. She would put a cloth on her head, and she would pray in Hebrew or Yiddish, I don't know. And I really didn't know what that was about. They just didn't talk about that, And even my father, after I became a believer, he called me and he said, you believe this, but that's not what we believe, so we don't want you ever to talk about it again. What you say to your brothers and sisters is fine. What you believe, that's fine, but that's not what we believe. And so I was asked, never to speak about it again, which of course I didn't obey. If I ever had an opportunity to say anything, you bet I said something.
Right.
Sometimes my mother would talk over me so she couldn't hear me, and sometimes my father would tell me to get off my soapbox. But eventually, my mother had prayed and accepted the Lord, and then my father was still in the hospital, tied down with cloths because when you have surgery and you're older, sometimes you become combative, which he had. And so he was just laying there, couldn't go anywhere, and I told him exactly what my mother had done. He didn't say a word, and when I was done, he just started talking about her and how he, believed that when he met her, that she just wanted somebody to love her and take care of her. And I mean, he certainly did that. He was an excellent husband. We didn't have a lot of nurturing. Nobody told us they loved us in our family until we were older and, living on our own and everything. And we would call them and tell them, but we never had hugs or hellos or goodbyes. You walked in the door, so you're home, But I believe that God really filled that void eventually.
So you believed in God when you were in high school and as you were growing up as an adult. So in between the time you actually received Yeshua and after your brother, answered and said, yeah, I believe there's something up there. Did you have any thoughts about God? Did anything interesting happen to you? Did you have any experiences? Or did you just move along and just do life?
Yeah, basically I did. I just was very, very secular. Back then everybody smoked, everybody drank a little bit, and we swore. It just didn't mean too much of anything until God just kind of got a hold of my heart. And, after I was married, and, I wasn't a hard child. If my parents had said, listen, when you grow up, you need to marry somebody of your own faith, maybe even your own tribe, but they didn't. They didn't give me that direction. And so I was kind of floundering. I mean, I got married when I was too young, but my mother-in-law was a believer, and so she kind of quoted me scriptures through the years, and she invited me to her congregation, and I went, and I felt good about being there. I felt at peace. But she asked me to go forward the first time I was there, and I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what you're talking about. So I said no. But eventually, because faith cometh by hearing and hearing the word of God, eventually I think that hunger I had in my heart to fill that void just grew. And then, we've been trying to have a child it took us 8.5 years to have our son, and then he was a preemie, and I had a dream one night. We were in Canada then, Richmond, BC, Canada, where he was born. And in the dream, I was holding him, and the devil was trying to grab him and take him from me, and I was holding on to him, and I said, no, you can't have him. You can't have him. And I pulled him back, and I knew nothing of the devil at all. I didn't know there was a devil. And the next day is when my in-laws came up for a short visit. They were very dysfunctional. They didn't really care so much about their son, or they were abusive, or even their only legitimate grandson. But I told her about the about the nightmare, and she put her hands on my forehead. She started praying in tongues, and she said, would you like to say this prayer? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand exactly, what's going on. But she, well, just say this prayer after me. So she led me through a sinner's prayer, and I prayed it, and, everybody was all happy and crying and everything. And I really did not understand what I had done. But the next day I went to my next door neighbor, who was not saved, but her husband was a backslidden Pentecostal. And so she knew a little bit about the Lord and stuff. And so I told her what I did, and she just said, wow, that's amazing, And it was several months later that my husband was transferred to a little town in the Cariboo called Williams Lake. And that was the first place that I actually attended a church. And I was praying before that because my husband went ahead of me, and I never really knew how to pray or anything. But when he called and said, he was already there, and he was looking for a house and didn't know anybody, he was lonely. And I got down on my knees that night and just prayed to God. And the next day he called and said, well, I have a friend, and I found a house. And so I learned quite early on that God answers prayer, and he honors our prayers. And so after that, when we got to this town, his boss invited us to church, and the rest is really to a congregation of very friendly people. It was actually Mennonite, but not per se. I mean, they were just a very warm, welcoming congregation. And I cried every Sunday, many weeks. I was going to other meetings. I thought if I could cry more there, I would cry less when I got to our Sunday morning congregation, but, it went on for quite a while, and I just felt like the Lord was just really cleansing my heart, from my past, and just drawing me closer to Him. And after that, I just wanted everything I could get. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, home Bible study.
So you were crying for sadness or for joy? Can you explain to our audience what you felt was happening?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. They sang this song called I Love You with the Love of the Lord, and they went around and were shaking people's hands, and I really didn't know exactly what was going on. I guess I was a little bit nervous, but I just really think that the Lord was cleansing my heart. And after that was finally done, where I could get to a service without weeping, possibly for joy, I was very joyful. I was very excited about knowing God and growing in Him and reading the scriptures for the first time. When I was in study and they asked me to read, I started reading, and I went, I don't know what these numbers mean. I don't know when to stop. So they explained to me, what it was about. So it was all good.
When you say cleansing, how did you feel when you felt God was cleansing you? How did you feel other than crying? When that was done, how did Elaine feel inside?
I just felt like I was washed by the blood of the Lamb. That I was cleansed. I was cleansed enough to be able to communicate directly with God, because we can talk directly to Him through His Son, the Messiah. It was just very exciting to me.
So it was a good place of freedom, like there was a connection with God, and as you were getting cleansed, you felt more freedom to communicate with Him and to feel close to Him.
Absolutely. And I had no qualms about talking to my friends, at the phone company. Everywhere we went, I worked at the phone company, because once you have the skill, they'll hire you. And it was a wonderful job. I enjoyed it. And we got to sit next to people very close, and when it was slow and we could talk a little bit, I actually was able to talk with a lady. There was a lady in between. She was a Seventh-day Adventist, I believe. And so the lady on the other side of her was searching. And we got to talk about the Lord and about salvation and stuff. And it wasn't long after that she said that she was at home, and she said she prayed and she just felt the presence of God, and she got saved. So, at that point, I think that the Lord was showing me, speak for me and tell people about me.
How did your life specifically change after you received Messiah?
It was only a few weeks after we moved to this town, and so it was a few months since I had accepted the Lord. But we had this young couple over for dinner, and I offered them a drink. And the way they said, "Oh, no, thank you," I'm like, oh, I was immediately convicted that you shouldn't be drinking alcohol if you're a believer. That's not honoring God. And so I took the bottle that we had of, see if I can, Kahlua, I think it was. And I think I poured it down the drain. And then I noticed on the bottle it said something about spirits. I went, oh, this is not good. It shouldn't be in our home. And so God just began convicting me of all kinds of stuff, like not using good language. I've been using bad language and the way I talk to people. And it's an ongoing process. You don't change overnight. But through time, He showed me how to talk with people better and be more understanding and compassionate. I'm still learning that today. I'm noticing, a change in relationships with people because some days I'm so verbose and I just really need to shut up, and I keep reading that scripture, the person that speaks before he thinks what he's going to say or whatever is like a fool, and I'm like, I think I'm still a little bit there, but I'm still working on it. It's just always, it's a process. You're still always learning and growing, I think.
So you feel that you have more compassion for people and that you're able to be kinder than you were before? Like you have a sensitivity that you didn't have before? Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, yeah. Before I was saved, I was very critical of everybody. And I could be very negative, too. I mean, I was having fun with people, but I might be making fun of them or chasing them or something. And I just learned, you could use God could change your humor, so it's a good thing.
So you feel that wasn't you before. You were critical, and even your sense of humor could be maybe cutting towards people. Okay.
For sure. Yes, for sure.
So you changed, and how did people start reacting to you when they knew the old Elaine? And how did your husband see you and your family? It's like, Elaine's changing. What was their reaction?
Well, I think I mentioned that my parents, because I was a little bit too verbose maybe with them, I wrote them a letter, told them about our congregation and some of the people and talked about the Bible and stuff like that, and I think it turned them off. And so they it wasn't long after we went back down to visit with them, they forbid me from speaking to them again. But I still would write cards or letters to my brothers and sisters, and I would quote scriptures, and some of them got mad about that too. So I had to back off a little bit. I mean, my parents accepted the Lord before they died. My father accepted the Lord 4 days before he died. But my other brothers and sisters thus far have not. I have one sister-in-law that got saved, and that's it.
I hear you. So what are some other good things that Yeshua did for you once you received him in your heart? How did you feel about yourself after you received Messiah as opposed to how you felt about yourself before you received Messiah?
Well, my parents were never really positive or affirming or nurturing or anything like that. And, to be with the family of God in a congregation, you are part of a family. You have sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and grandparents, people that I never had in my life, and they love you. They talk to you, they affirm you, and if you have a problem, you know who you can go to talk to. And so I was not alone anymore. I was part of a greater family, and I mean that really gave me a lot of confidence. It gave me a lot of peace
that you hadn't had before, is what you're saying. So you feel better about yourself now than you did before. So the Lord,
yes.
God through Yeshua did a change about how you felt about yourself.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, before I was saved, you think, I talk to other people, and it's like you feel like, what are you here for? What's the purpose? There's just nothing. It's just so sad to see so many people that don't have a purpose in life. I mean, you can tell by the way they walk, they've got a purpose. And you can meet people, and you can tell that they're believers. And then you can see other people that don't have any hope. They don't know where they're going when they die. And I mean, this is an opportunity for us to do great things for the Lord just by saying, why don't you come and visit with us on Sunday morning and just try it out. Come and have a cup of coffee. And my friends would love to meet you. And I will meet with people sometimes. I'll just invite them to coffee and just get to know them, because I joined the local Jewish congregation that became a member and everything, so I could be a positive light in the darkness. And I believe that God has used me to some extent there. It's been very difficult, but I have a few friends, and some of them call me friends. I'm very honored that they do, because many of them think I'm crazy. They won't have anything to do with me.
So some people that are Jewish had a hard time with you coming to Yeshua, Yeshua Jesus, and that's an issue, and including your parents, they didn't want you talking about Messiah, and that's a true thing, and that must have been really hard for you.
Well, I mean, I think I was so excited for many years. I don't think I was so hurt by that because God seems to have given me this personality. My son's kindergarten teacher said there was two types of personalities. There was the badger, and honestly, I can't remember what the other one was. But
badger?
I would say it. I would say that I'm more of a badger, and so.
What does that mean exactly? I'm sorry.
Well, I think it's more tenacious. If somebody, is rejecting me and saying, because I have one wonderful friend named Harriet. She's very Jewish, and she's in her 90s. She amazes me at how much energy she has and how smart she is. And I've talked to her about the Lord, and I went to visit with her when she went into an assisted living facility, semi-independent, after her husband passed away. And I went to her, and I asked if I could pray with her, and she said yes, and I told her I loved her, and she told me she loved me. And I gave her a hug before I left, and I was just so honored and amazed that she would go that far to let me do that for her. So she's heard it. She's heard the message, and I just have to keep praying for her. And then there's others that I can tell that they're just being nice to me because they believe that synagogue in particular is more into human rights than they are into any kind of religion per se. And so I think that they're being nice to me because they think they're earning their way to heaven.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you don't know God personally, but you try to want to have favor with Him. And I did it before I came to Yeshua. I try to do the good works. I try to be a good person and do things. I don't think I thought about it like. I don't think I was conscious that I was trying to win God's favor by doing good works, but that's basically what you try to do, and that is a form of religion without the power, as the Apostle Paul talked about. And the Apostle Paul was a very learned person who was the most Jewish of all the apostles in terms of studying and having gone to biblical schooling, just he could teach it and all that. But so he understood about what the law required, and he knew the law and all that. And when he finally received Messiah, he said there's a form of religion without the power, and the power is God's power through the Messiah that gives you the power to walk in relationship with God when you receive Him as Messiah, and to change. That's why you are not the same person you were like you were before you received Messiah. That you were critical and you weren't a compassionate person. Well, that is the work. That's the power of God changing your heart. You can do the positive thing and try to do, be this wonderful person, and you can do get to a certain point, but in your heart of hearts, for you to change to be a different person than who you are, that is the power of the Messiah. That's the power of God through the Messiah. And that's what Yeshua does when you receive Him. He's able to change your heart and begin to become like Him. He is a perfect love, and He loves everyone unconditionally in this world, the good and the bad. He makes it rain and the sun shine over every person. And he's the real thing as far as he's the real thing with that what real love is. And he did that change in you so that you now have a heart of compassion that you didn't have before because of who's living inside you now. Messiah is living inside you, and that gives you the power. So the religion without the power is us trying to do the works. We're trying to do this and that to please God, to look good in front of people, to, get kudos, to feel good about ourselves or feel like we're worthy of and valuable and all that, but that's really not real. It's not real spirituality. It's not real faith and real relationship with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's the facts on that. So Elaine, you are a published author, and what got you started writing? How did you get to the place of becoming that published author? Can you give us a little background about how you got started writing, and then share a little bit about your books with us?
Well, I was just going through a time where I felt like I wasn't doing enough of anything. And I just, my husband had some surgeries, and so I wasn't able to get out as much or anything like that. And so a friend of mine had a similar background. Her ancestors came from Russia, and she was born in Canada. And so she wrote a book about her family, and I thought, whoa, she wrote a book. I should be able to write a book. And so I sat down at the computer, and I thought, what should I write? Well, you write what you know. So I thought, well, my family. I know about my family. So I started writing about my family. So Montreal, just started right at the beginning. And I wrote for about an hour or something. And then I just put it away. And the next day I didn't do anything. And I said, Lord, what am I doing? I'm writing. I need to get back to that. And so I sat down again at the computer, and I said, Lord, if this is from you, then you need to give me words. I'm just not sure, what I'm doing here, okay? So I sat down and I wrote, and I did not stop I stopped to go to bed and stuff like that, right? But I wrote for hours every day. I made a big dent. It took about 3 days, and I made a big dent in what I was writing. And then I talked to a friend and said, how many words do you need for a book? And they said, about 30,000 at least if you're writing a memoir, and I go, oh my. So I went back and sat down, and I go, Lord, I need some help here. And so I wrote more. And then basically I finished it, and then I went to my friend's book coach, and she told me exactly what I was doing wrong, and I was able to, then they worked again. I was able to fix things and everything. And what we actually do, if you're not Truman Capote, you don't think you're going to make a fortune off your books, what you do is, and my goal was not to make a fortune. My goal was to make it Christian-based so that people would read it and maybe read some scriptures and see in my book the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then I had a prayer at the end of the book, and maybe somebody would think about God, or maybe they would even get saved or whatever. So we self-published through a place called Create Space online, and you can order as many books as you want or whatever. And so I did that, and then I had like a little book signing, and there was a congregation in Boise that had a day where local authors could come, and they put out tables, and you brought your books and stuff like that. And so I sold a bunch or whatever. And then when I was done with that, I thought, well, I still feel like there's something I should be writing. And so since my husband was retired law enforcement, I said, if I write a book about your job and everything that you did, all the different calls you went on, and the arrests and the shootings and all that other stuff, could you give me some scenarios? And he said, well, yeah. And so I started writing about him, and I opened the book with how God protected him. One night he was supposed to work the east end of we lived in Riverside. That's where he started being a policeman. And his partner called in sick, and this area that you work, you only work a two-man two-man team. And so because his partner called in, they sent my husband to the south more rural area of Riverside, and these two other gentlemen were working the east side. And they ended up getting ambushed and murdered, and they even made a movie about it. Oh. And so even back then when I wasn't saved, God had his hand on my husband, and I wasn't really worried or afraid, for his job. And the divorce rate back then was very high because a lot of wives could not deal with that. But I was always very excited. My husband called me a wannabe. I was excited to hear about his job and what he was doing and all that stuff. So when I wanted to write, then I started out with that, and then I just kind of took off from there. I changed the character. I changed the names to protect the guilty ones. And so we had to call it a fiction so nobody would sue you, But the actual events were real. They were based on fact. And so wow. I said, okay, I've finished your scenarios. I need more, and you give me more. And so I changed the character a bit. I made him what I wanted him to be. And so then, at the end, during the book, he meets somebody who goes on a call, and he meets a young woman, and he kind of falls in love with her, but he's a believer, so he wants to establish a godly relationship. And then she disappears, and he can't find her. He doesn't know where she is. So when I finished that book, I wrote a sequel, and that's police novel with David One, and his picture's on the cover in his police car from another city. So I kind of combined all the different places that he worked. And so then I wrote the sequel, which is called Finding Melody, and I got a professional cover. And, the Lord was just in so many details. I found a young lady that was a photographer, and I told her what I wanted. The girl that he lost in the book could have been a Russian spy. We don't know. So I had Russian buildings on the front of the cover. And the young lady that she used for the book, I chose several different pictures, and the one that I chose, and I sent you the picture so you would have seen her. She was just gorgeous, and she looked Russian. Well, it turned out that one of the young men in my congregation, he's a high school math teacher, and that girl on the cover was a former student of his.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so amazing. And so in the book, he's still a policeman, so he's still doing all these calls, but he takes time off to go to another state because he finds out that she might be there or her brother is there or something. And so we don't know exactly what she's into, if she's in for the Russian mafia or if she's doing drugs or what. And so that was just kind of fun. And I took a little more license in that book. He thinks she's gone, and so he establishes a relationship with another young lady, and then they're in a restaurant having an ice cream parlor or something, having a dessert, and some man comes in and is trying to rob them, and this lady is going. The young man's name is Bradley, in the book, and so she goes, Brad, do something, just do something. You're a policeman, do something. And he's telling her to be quiet, just let him take the money and go. Nobody will get hurt. But she's, no, you have to do something. And so she starts yelling, and she gets up there and starts doing something, and the guy that's robbing the store ends up shooting her. So she gets killed, in the book.
Oh, my goodness. It's a very exciting book. Makes me want to read that one right away.
That's one lady at my congregation said she was kind of exciting, like a police. I can't remember what she called it, but she said it was kind of exciting. So that was just very fun. But I leave the Lord, throughout all of the books, so that if there was a message to be found, they would find it while they were reading, and maybe they would have hope that maybe they could have the faith, too, to believe in God, to trust in Him, and to become a believer in the Messiah.
Uh-huh.
That was my goal.
So God helped you write these books.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you serve a very exciting God.
We do.
I believe it. I think that He loves adventure, and He loves new things. He loves to get us into interesting situations. I don't think God's bored at all. I mean, you have those pictures of people make these drawings of heaven and people are playing harps and it looks real boring, but I don't believe that's going to be the case at all. I think God is not boring whatsoever, you know?
That's right.
How could a God that shows up and talks to somebody and a God that's in a burning bush shows up and talks to somebody and says, okay, you're going to go and you are going to rescue millions of Jewish people that are stuck in Egypt. Now, is that boring or what?
No.
We don't serve a boring God. I hope you're going to write a sequel to Melody, Finding Melody.
That's entirely up to the Lord.
It sounds like people are on edge to find out what's the next book here.
There's still a chance of romance for them. If she can maybe leave Russia, Mother Russia, there is a chance.
Sounds good to me. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, and you wrote some poetry too. Had you done anything with your poetry as of yet, or?
No, I don't write too much of that anymore. But in junior high school, I wrote a poem. Well, I was about 8, I think, 7 or 8. My parents shipped the 5 of us off to a congregation just a few blocks away, I think, so they could get some peace and quiet, right? 5 kids. And I must have heard the gospel then or something, because when I was in junior high, I wrote a poem, and I can't remember it, but I know it started out, love is patient, love is kind, something else. To some it might be very rare. I don't remember it, but I think it came from one of the scriptures.
Yeah.
The Bible. Well, the Bible says love is patient, love is kind, and I think that's where it came from. And I actually did get a pin for that. I got a little award.
Yeah, that's in 1 Corinthians 13 in the New Covenant.
Right.
Yeah. It's a beautiful scripture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's really deep. That you wrote a poem about what love is, because it's really a description of the Messiah. And
that's right.
We're getting to the end of our time, and I would like to. What does the love of God mean to you? If you could share briefly on that. What is that? How do you see God's love differently than you see the love of just the human love?
Right. Well, I think when you have made a profession of faith to God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you fill that void in your life, and you really have the peace of God that passes all understanding, and you can call on Him for help in any situation. You know, He has always met our needs. We've never been without, food or clothing or shelter or anything. And He doesn't give us what we want, but He does give us what we need. And He's always there. I mean, we have His phone number. Jeremiah 33:3, call unto me and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things which you have not known. If you don't have wisdom, then you're not asking God for it, because it's available to any believer 24/7.
Thank you so much for being with us, Elaine. It was a real blessing. And like I said, I hope that you'll be having another book coming up, and that we will find out what happened to Melody. But
well, you really challenged me now.
But for those of you who are making that decision and you want to receive Messiah, he's waiting for you to turn your heart towards Him. He loves you with an everlasting love. He loves you now, even though you don't know Him. He loves you with the kind of love that no human being has. It's a perfect love, and it's a love that it has nothing to do with how good we are, or how many works we do. It's an unconditional love. But as we step out to give our lives to Him,
He will meet us where we are, and He'll make the changes in our lives that we need. That guilt and issues from the past that have been a burden to us. When we receive Him in our hearts, He takes those things away. He takes that burden. When Elaine was crying, when she first came to Yeshua, she went through this whole period of time where she was crying. Well, God was doing this deep cleaning in her heart. He was taking away pain from her of things that she had gone through in her life. He was removing shame and guilt, and where she made mistakes and had committed sin. He was cleaning her up. He was healing her up. And that's what He does for us. And that's why when she went through that whole metamorphosis, which is probably one of the better human words, it's a real transformation. When she went through that, she came out a different person. She was able to have compassion where she wasn't able to have compassion before. That's because she received the one who is the real one that has compassion and love for humanity. Well, He created us with His own hands, and why does He want us to repent and turn to Him? It's because He made us to walk our lives out with Him. He hungers to have the relationship with each one of us that He had with Adam and Eve in the garden, where He had sweet relationship, sweet fellowship. I don't know how else to phrase it. He had this wonderful relationship with Adam and Eve, and He longs to have that with each one of us. That's His heart. He's not a hard taskmaster out to make sure you're perfect. He makes that change in our hearts, just like He did that for Elaine. And He wants to do that for you today. He wants to do that for you today. And He's able to change you. Whatever the issues in your life is, if you have an addiction, He's able to heal you from that. If you have bitterness and unforgiveness, He's able to heal you from that. He's able to give you the ability to forgive and change your heart. He's able to take away that the criticalness, or even maybe some of you have self-hatred. Whatever the issue is, Yeshua can do that transformation. He can do that metamorphosis in our hearts, and He can do that change in our minds. And when He does that, you will be so grateful, because you will experience His love, and you'll be able to walk a life out with Him. And it is an amazing life. And God has adventures, and He has good things. He has good plans, a future and a hope for you. Jeremiah 29:11. So we encourage you to come and receive the Jewish Messiah, embrace Him. He wants you to experience His love, and that He's had all along for you since the very point of conception. He made you, He placed you in your mother's womb, and He has loved you from the very beginning. He loves you now, and He's calling you to come and receive Him as your Jewish Messiah. Thank you for listening to Tikvah Radio Show, the voice of hope. If you have been blessed by this program and want to join us in sharing with others the hope of Yeshua HaMashiach, a gift of any amount will be appreciated. You can donate and contact us on our website at tikvahradio.com. Once again, that's TIKVAH radio.com. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.